Now in county, what is your emergency?
Yes, I just saw a shooting, please.
Okay, do you know if anybody's been shot?
Yes, I see the lady. I see her in her garage right now.
Is somebody shot?
Yes.
Stay on the line. Let me connect you with the ambulance service. Hold on.
It's November 9th, 1994. Farah Fratta stopped on a beautiful Wednesday afternoon to get her hair done, as it was her ex-husband's day with the kids. Not knowing two men were on their way to a house to commit a heinous act later that day. It would have been a beautiful night that night, as Robert, her ex-husband, took the kids out to church and had fun activities while praying so that she can have a lovely night in. Farah arrived home later that afternoon as neighbors Laura and Darren stated they saw her pull into a driveway only to suddenly hear a pop. She quickly stood up only to see the beloved mother of three neighbor lying on the ground next to her car. Farah's parents, Lex and Betty, were notified by neighbors shortly after ambulance and police arrived, in which they hurried to the scene where they got her while she was still fighting for her life. Paramedics rushed to the chopper, but it was already too late as her parents stood in disbelief as they watched their daughter pass away. Lex immediately knew Bob had something to do with it and called out, "Where's that son of a bitch?" Robert Allen Fratta, aka Bob, to the outside world an upstanding citizen working in public safety as both a police officer and fireman, a loving father and a regular church attender, but there was apparently a very different side to Bob. Bob was a coprophilic. You search that at your own risk, but let's just say it's one of the reasons Farah filed a divorce against him. Just months before Farah's death, she had an intruder break in her home and attack her with a stun gun in the early hours of the morning, waking up her children, which may have spooked the attacker, but he was never ever caught till this day. On the night of Farah's death, Detective Davis knew Bob was somehow involved, but his alibi was too strong, as plenty of people saw him in church with the children that night. Bob arrived on the scene hours after Farah passed away, only to be taken in for questioning as $1,000 was found in the glove compartment of his car, which raised a lot of suspicion. Bob walked free the next day after questioning, but his demeanor was very off-putting for a man who has just lost a mother to his children. This raised alarm bells within the Justice Department. Bob was more concerned about attaining custody of his children. However, Lex and Betty was not planning to go without a fight against the man suspected to have killed their daughter. While Fratta was making his case for custody, detectives were building their case against him. Detective Larry Davis started following Bob wherever he went to speak with everyone he hung out with. It was at the gym where Larry heard some interesting conversations when he interviewed Mike Edens, who worked out with Fratta.
I guess I'll go. And I said, okay. I said, hey, Bob, stay out of trouble. And he turned around and looked at me and he goes, what could be worse than capital murder? He goes, what could be worse than capital murder?
It was said that 15 to 17 different guys all mentioned Bob talking about ending his wife's life within the gym. They stated he seemed like he had everything planned out and just needed someone to carry out the dirty deed. When Detective Larry approached the church, a lot of the ladies recalled Bob being on and off the phone quite frequently. They stated his pager kept going off and he returned the calls using the church's phone. Detectives then traced the call he made, which went back to Mary Gibb. After further investigation, Mary Gibb, who first withheld information for 4 months after Farah's death, spilled the beans after being threatened with murder by police. Detectives later learned that Mary was staying with ex-con boyfriend Joseph Prestash, who worked out with Bob at the gym. Mary confessed she knew who killed Farah Fratta, why and how. She also saw the gun and wrote down the serial number, but held her tongue irrespective. Detective Larry knew Mary was the key to this case and brought her forward to a grand jury to spill the beans for immunity. Mary confessed her boyfriend Joe, who knew Bob from the gym, was hired by him to set up the murder. Joe then got their 18-year-old neighbor Howard Guidry involved to be the trigger man. Howard would get $1,000 for the job. Joe would drive Howard to the murder scene, pick him up afterwards, and use Mary's cell phone to tell Bob it was done. The issue was Mary knew the whole plan and would also work out with Farah from time to time at the gym. Many believe she could have gone to the cops before Farah would have still been alive. However, Mary only wrote down the serial number of the gun when her boyfriend returned from the murder scene that night. After the gun serial was given, police were able to trace it back to their number one suspect, Robert Allen Fratta. Police didn't have to look far for the gun. It was right under their noses in one of their own evidence rooms. The gun had been used in a bank robbery after the murder, and luckily for detectives, the alleged bank robber had been caught with it. He was in jail and his name was Howard Guidry. Guidry was questioned, and it wasn't long before he confessed to everything. He even went with police to the murder scene to show them how he did it.
I faced the woman. We was face to face, and I turned to the side like this, and we was face to face like this, and I had the gun in my hand.
The dominoes were falling quickly. After Howard confessed, Joe was arrested and also confessed. They were both charged with murder. They fingered Fratta, and 5 months after the crime, Bob Fratta, who hoped a well-timed trip to church would shield him from suspicion, was arrested and charged with murdering the mother of his 3 children. But proving that he did it will be harder than prosecutors thought. By the time the trial began, Joe and Howard said their confessions were coerced, withdrew them, and refused to testify. Prosecutors would have to call one witness who saw Bob Fratta making all those phone calls the night of the murder, as well as Bob's own son, who was only 7 at the time, to testify against his own father. 1996, 2 years after the murder, Howard, Joe, and Robert were sentenced to death for the murder of Farah Fratta. "13 years after the murder, a federal judge threw out Fratta's conviction, ordered a new trial, and set off a new round of legal wrangling. Due to the first confessions made by Howard and Joe that should have never been admitted, Mary's testimony was also ruled a hearsay. This left victim's family in disbelief and feared Bob to have an actual chance to walk free again. The new prosecutors' backs were against the wall as crucial evidence was thrown out and a new case had to be made almost 15 years later. The key in this new trial would be none other than Bob's youngest, Amber, who also testified in court against her own father, letting the jury know how scared they are of him.
I pretty much was like, all right, I'll see you in court. You know, I don't want anything else to do with you. I'm done with this conversation. You're never going to own up to what you did.
With the motive, the phone calls, the gun, all the other people he solicited, and how affected his children were. After 2 days of deliberation, the verdict was finally given.
And the defendant, Robin Allen Fratta, guilty of capital murder as charged in the indictment signed by the foreman.
He was a coward in 1994, and 28 years plus later, he still was a coward tonight when he was offered an opportunity to at least extend an olive branch to his son